A racist woman wrecked the dress, assuming the waitress was just another black employee. Her millionaire husband caught the act, observing the red wine spread across the white dress like a stain of blood on freshly fallen snow. Victoria Hartwell took in her destructive work, a cruel sense of satisfaction playing across her face as the young waitress frantically tried to wipe away the spill from her skirt. "Oops," Victoria said with false innocence, her smile flashing perfect teeth that contrasted sharply with her rotten heart. "It's such a pity when people like you don't know how to behave in civilized settings." The annual Boston Charity Gala was the place to be for the East Coast elite, all gathered in one of the city's most upscale hotels. Austrian crystals glittered from the ceilings, imported orchids served as centerpieces on every table, and the subtle melody of a string quartet played the perfect soundtrack for high society hypocrisy. Jasmine Washington, only 24, never imagined that taking an extra waitressing shift would land her smack dab in the middle of a racial firestorm, one that would turn everything upside down. A Harvard MBA student, she needed the extra cash to support her family and cover her last semester of college. Her natural hair was elegantly pulled back into a neat bun, and she carried her trays with the effortless grace of someone who'd spent their life balancing heavy responsibilities. Victoria Hartwell, on the flip side, was exactly the type of woman who saw charity galas as her personal runway. As the wife of real estate bigwig Robert Hartwell, she enjoyed the fruits of being born into wealth and marrying into even more. Her life was an endless string of charity luncheons, expensive spa days, and shopping sprees that cost more than entire families made in a year. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Jasmine said, maintaining a calmness that surprised even herself as she bent to pick up the shattered pieces of the glass that Victoria had accidentally knocked over. "I'll get this cleaned up right away. Don't even worry about it," Victoria responded, loud enough to make sure nearby tables were listening. "I suppose accidents like this are bound to happen when you hire these kinds of people for fancy events." The poisonous nature of Victoria's words was so potent that the surrounding conversations died down as people turned to watch the drama unfold. Jasmine could feel their stares, some full of embarrassment, while others seemed entertained by the free spectacle of public shaming. "Perhaps you should consider more qualified professionals for events of this caliber," Victoria continued, adding theatrical hand gestures. "People who naturally know how to behave in refined society." What Victoria didn't realize was that every single one of her hateful words was being absorbed by Jasmine with the patience of someone who had already weathered far worse storms. Growing up on the south side of Chicago with a single mother holding down 3 jobs, Jasmine had learned early on that real strength doesn't need to shout or even react. It simply observes, learns, and waits for the right moment to act. "Of course, ma'am," Jasmine replied, her voice calm, which only seemed to irritate Victoria even more, clearly frustrated by the lack of an emotional reaction. "I'll make sure everything is taken care of." As she walked toward the kitchen with the broken glass, Jasmine subtly passed the head table, where a distinguished gray-haired man watched the entire scene with an unreadable expression. Their eyes met for a split second, and he gave an almost imperceptible nod, as if acknowledging something in her that others couldn't see. Robert Hartwell had built his real estate empire on one simple principle: observe people when they think nobody's watching. And at that moment, seeing his wife publicly humiliate a young working woman, he saw 2 things with absolute clarity: Victoria's truly cruel nature and the incredible dignity of the waitress, who managed to keep her composure even under fire. Back in the kitchen, Jasmine finally let her hands tremble a little as she threw away the shards of glass. Just 20 minutes before, she had been just another student working to make ends meet. Now, she felt a rising sense of purpose, almost as if the universe was setting the stage for something much bigger than just a night's work. What nobody in that luxurious ballroom could possibly have imagined was that the simple waitress Victoria had just attacked possessed secrets that would turn the humiliation into a catalyst for a transformation they'd never forget. If you've ever witnessed injustice like this and want to see how one person can turn the lives of those who think they're better than everyone else completely upside down, be sure to subscribe to this channel and follow the story of justice. It will prove that underestimating people can cost you more than any fortune. Victoria wasn't done yet. While Jasmine was in the kitchen grabbing clean towels and a new uniform, The socialite had found her perfect audience. A group of high-society women hanging on her every word like she was revealing the secrets of the universe. "Did you see that?" Victoria said dramatically, her voice oozing with theatrical indignation. "The sheer audacity of some people to think they can just waltz into our events." Clearly, the organizers didn't screen the staff properly. Margaret Wellington, heiress to a pharmaceutical fortune, nodded enthusiastically. "Darling, you're absolutely right. Just yesterday, I had to fire a maid because she actually questioned my cleaning methods. These people need to understand boundaries." Jasmine walked back into the main hall and immediately felt the weight of their stares. Victoria's group had grown, and she could catch bits of their mean-spirited conversation as she replaced the glasses on a nearby table. Of course she came back. She probably needs this job desperately. Imagine if one of our daughters had to work like this. At least she knows her place and didn't try to talk back. Victoria noticed Jasmine's presence and deliberately raised her voice. "Anyway, girls, I suppose we shouldn't be too hard on her. After all, not everyone is lucky enough to be born with a silver spoon in their mouth and get a proper education." What Victoria didn't know was that Jasmine had graduated summa cum laude in economics from the University of Chicago before earning her spot at Harvard. She had spent her childhood translating legal documents for her mother, who cleaned offices at night to support her 3 children alone. By the time she was 16, she was already managing the family finances and had turned their small savings into a fund that paid for her 2 younger brothers to go to college. Jasmine silently finished setting the table, but Margaret decided to add her own 2 cents to the public humiliation. "Dear," she said to Jasmine, her voice dripping with condescension, "you do understand that staff members should remain discreet during events, right? Try to avoid drawing unnecessary attention to yourselves." "Yes, ma'am," Jasmine replied, maintaining respectful but firm eye contact. "I understand perfectly." Something about Jasmine's tone made Margaret frown. There was a certain level of articulation, a presence that didn't fit the stereotypes she was expecting to find. Victoria noticed her friend's hesitation and decided to ramp up the attack. "Margaret's right." In fact, Victoria stood up and approached Jasmine with a cruel smile. "Perhaps we should have a little chat about proper protocol. You can read, can't you?" The question was delivered with calculated malice, loud enough for other tables to hear. An awkward silence fell over the area, and Jasmine felt dozens of eyes fixed on her, waiting for her reaction. "Yes, ma'am. I read perfectly well," Jasmine replied, her voice still professionally calm, but with a new glint in her eyes. Victoria let out a high-pitched, unpleasant laugh. "Great. Then maybe you can read this for us." She grabbed the event menu and held it out to Jasmine, speaking loudly. "Just so we can be sure that the service staff understands exactly what is being served to our important guests." It was a calculated, cruel humiliation. Victoria wanted to force Jasmine to expose herself, hoping she'd stutter over the French words, refuse to read, or give her a reason to call security. Robert Hartwell, who had been watching the entire scene from the head table, felt a wave of shame and anger wash over him. 23 years of marriage to Victoria had revealed many unpleasant sides to her personality, but he had never seen her be so openly malicious. Jasmine took the menu, her hands steady. For a moment, she looked directly at Victoria, and for the first time that night, allowed a small smile to play at the corner of her mouth. "With pleasure, ma'am." Then, to the complete shock of everyone present, Jasmine began to read the menu, not just fluently, but with a perfect French pronunciation that she had learned during her 2-year exchange program in Lyon, funded by a merit-based academic scholarship. Asterisk amuse-bouche diagrams, gelée au champagne, suivi de paileron de boeuf confit et ux truffes noirs du Périgord star. Her voice was clear and confident, with a French accent that would make Parisians jealous. The words flowed like music, each syllable pronounced with a precision that revealed not only a knowledge of the language, but an intimate familiarity with French culinary culture. Victoria gradually paled as Jasmine continued, realizing that her plan had backfired spectacularly. Margaret stared with her mouth hanging open, and the other women in the group exchanged uncomfortable glances. Asterisk et pour terminer, tuile au grue de cacao, crème glacée vanille de Madagascar star. Jasmine finished, handing the menu back to Victoria with a serene smile. "I hope that was helpful, ma'am." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria stood frozen, still holding the menu, completely speechless for the first time that evening. It was impossible to deny that the simple waitress possessed a level of education and sophistication that rivaled anyone in the room. Robert stood up from the head table and slowly walked toward the group. His eyes met Jasmine's for a brief moment, and she saw something in them. Not pity, but respect, and something that looked a lot like admiration. "Victoria," he said softly, his voice carrying a tone she immediately recognized as a warning. "Perhaps it's time we focused on the real purpose of this evening, charity." Victoria quickly regained her composure, realizing she had lost control of the situation. "Of course, dear. I was just trying to make sure everyone understood the proper protocols." Jasmine nodded respectfully and walked away to continue her work, but not before Margaret whispered nervously to Victoria, "Darling, perhaps we misjudged the situation." Victoria grabbed Margaret's arm with unnecessary force. "We didn't misjudge anything," she hissed quietly. "Fancy tricks don't change who she really is. And before tonight is over, I'll make sure everyone here understands that perfectly well." What Victoria couldn't have known was that Jasmine had spent the last 4 years meticulously documenting cases of racial discrimination in corporate environments for her MBA thesis. She had discrete recording devices, knew the new civil rights laws inside and out, and every hateful word uttered that night was being meticulously recorded. While Victoria was plotting her next attempt at humiliation, Jasmine walked through the room with the quiet confidence of someone carrying a secret too powerful to be revealed before the opportune moment. She had learned at a young age that real strength doesn't shout. It observes, documents, and acts at precisely the most devastating moment. Robert returned to the head table, but he couldn't take his eyes off the young woman he had just seen being attacked by his own wife. There was something about that waitress that intrigued him deeply, a dignity, an intelligence that couldn't be hidden, no matter what uniform she wore. What none of those present could have imagined was that the simple worker Victoria was trying to humiliate was just weeks away from becoming the youngest senior analyst at one of the country's most prestigious consulting firms, and that every act of discrimination that night was building a case that would turn the humiliation into the catalyst for a justice none of them would ever forget. Jasmine slipped into the hotel's elegant restroom and finally allowed her hands to shake, not from fear, but from a controlled adrenaline rush that she knew well from her days defending herself on the streets of Chicago. She discreetly pulled a small digital recorder from her uniform pocket and checked the recording quality. Crystal clear, 23 minutes of racial slurs, blatant discrimination, and intentional humiliation, all perfectly documented. For her MBA thesis on racial microaggressions in elite corporate environments, this night had become an academic gold mine. But now, looking at her reflection in the gilded mirror, Jasmine realized that this was so much bigger than just a university research project. "Jasmine." A soft voice knocked on the door. "Are you okay?" It was Robert Hartwell. Jasmine immediately recognized the voice she had heard addressing the organizers during the event. For a moment, she considered ignoring him, but something in his genuinely concerned tone made her open the door. Robert stood alone in the hallway, his hands clasped together in a way that betrayed his nervousness. "I apologize for my wife's utterly unacceptable behavior. There's no justification for what I witnessed." Jasmine studied him carefully. 24 years of life had taught her to tell the difference between condescending pity and genuine respect. In Robert's eyes, she saw something she rarely found in white men of his position, real shame and anger directed at his own family. "Mr. Hartwell, I appreciate your concern, but you don't need to feel responsible for your wife's actions." "Of course, I do," Robert replied firmly. 23 years of marriage have given me plenty of opportunities to correct behavior like this, and I've failed miserably. "Jasmine, may I ask you a direct question?" She nodded, curious. "You're not really a waitress, are you?" Jasmine smiled for the first time that evening. "What makes you say that?" "Your French is better than anyone else's in that room, including professors from renowned universities I know. Your posture, your articulation, the way you maintain your dignity under attack." Robert paused. "Besides, I recognize intelligence when I see it. I'm an MBA student at Harvard," Jasmine admitted. "I work as a waitress to help my family and finish my studies." Robert closed his eyes, clearly taking in the weight of the situation. "Harvard. My God, Jasmine. Victoria attacked a Harvard student out of pure racial prejudice. Mr. Hartwell, this happens more often than you realize. Your wife simply verbalized what many people think silently. That doesn't make it acceptable, Robert said, his voice filled with an emotion that surprised Jasmine. In fact, it makes it much worse. May I ask what your area of expertise is at Harvard? Analysis of systemic discrimination in corporate environments. I'm finishing a thesis on how prejudice affects professional opportunities for minorities. Robert was silent for a long moment. Jasmine, may I make a proposal? It might sound strange. 15 minutes later, they were sitting in a secluded corner of the hotel lobby, far away from the prying eyes of the gala. Robert had ordered 2 coffees and was speaking in a low voice, as if they were conspiring. My company, Hartwell Development, has been facing some serious diversity issues. The board is pushing for real change, not just cosmetic, especially after some recent incidents. Jasmine listened intently, her academic instincts kicking in, picking up on every nuance. I need someone with your expertise to conduct a thorough audit of our hiring practices, promotions, and corporate culture. Someone who understands both the theory and the reality of discrimination in the workplace. Mr. Hartwell, that's very generous, but it's not generosity, Jasmine. It's urgent necessity and self-interest. My company needs real change, and you clearly have the knowledge and experience to implement it. Robert slid a card across the table. External consulting, payment in line with market standards for specialists of your caliber. You would retain complete autonomy over methods and conclusions. Jasmine took the card, feeling the weight of the possibilities. Why are you doing this? Because I've spent 23 years living with a woman whose prejudices I silently tolerated. Because I built a company that probably replicates the same systemic problems you study. And because, frankly, after what I witnessed tonight, I need to do something meaningful to repair the damage my family causes in the world. Just then, Victoria appeared in the lobby, searching for her husband. When she saw him talking to Jasmine, her expression turned into a mask of barely concealed fury. Robert, dear, she said, approaching the table with a forced smile. I was looking for you. What are you doing here with her? Victoria, I'm offering Jasmine a position as a consultant at the company. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Victoria looked from her husband to Jasmine as if she had just witnessed a marital betrayal. You're joking, right? Victoria laughed, but the sound was high-pitched and nervous. Robert, she's a waitress. She's an MBA student at Harvard specializing in exactly the area where our company needs help. Victoria visibly paled. Harvard? Yes, Victoria. The woman you publicly humiliated tonight is a highly qualified academic who's working here to support her family. Jasmine observed the dynamics between the couple with the clinical eye of someone who studies social behavior. Victoria was clearly in shock, but also quickly calculating how to minimize the damage to her reputation. Well, Robert, even if that's true, it doesn't mean we should make rash decisions based on feelings of guilt. It's not guilt, Victoria. It's recognition of competence and a real business need. Victoria addressed Jasmine directly for the first time since the initial humiliation. Darling, I'm sure you understand that sometimes misunderstandings happen at social events. Perhaps we should all just forget about tonight's minor disagreements. Victoria's desperate attempt to minimize her cruelty as a mere misunderstanding was so transparent that Jasmine almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Ms. Hartwell, there was no misunderstanding. Your comments were very clear and direct. Victoria forced another smile. Of course, dear, but intelligent people like you surely understand that sometimes social context can be complicated. Actually, Jasmine replied calmly, people with my academic background tend to be very precise about context and meaning, especially when it comes to documented racial discrimination. The word documented made Victoria recoil slightly. Documented? Robert watched his wife's expression and understood immediately. Victoria, were you recorded? Jasmine neither confirmed nor denied it, but her eloquent silence said it all. Victoria began to understand that this evening had become much more complicated than a simple humiliation of a service worker. Jasmine, Robert said, rising from the table, I await your response to the consulting proposal. My assistant will contact you tomorrow with the contract details. As the couple walked away, Jasmine could hear the beginning of a heated argument. Victoria had realized too late that she had attacked the wrong person at the wrong time, and in the wrong way. Back in the restroom, Jasmine checked the recorder again and smiled. 23 minutes of explicit racial discrimination, followed by 15 minutes of a desperate attempt at damage control. For her thesis, this was gold. For her career, it was an unexpected opportunity to implement real change at an important company. But as she prepared to return to the dining room and finish her shift, Jasmine felt that something much bigger was taking shape. The humiliation Victoria had tried to inflict was becoming the foundation for something that would change not only her own life, but potentially the culture of an entire company. What Victoria didn't yet understand was that she had attacked not just a waitress, but a future expert on corporate discrimination, who would now have direct access to her own husband's company's internal systems. The irony was delicious, but Jasmine knew that true justice would come through meticulous work, systemic change, and measurable results. As she checked her reflection one last time, Jasmine realized that tonight had marked the end of one phase of her life and the beginning of something completely new. Victoria had tried to put her in her place, unaware that she was actually catapulting her into a position of power that she would use to ensure that others never had to endure the same humiliation. The waitress was about to become the consultant, and when that happened, it would be Victoria who would discover where she really belonged in a world where competence and character mattered more than inherited privileges. 3 weeks later, Victoria Hartwell woke up with a strange feeling in her stomach. Her phone showed 47 missed calls and hundreds of unread messages. When she opened the first link Margaret had sent at 6 a.m., she felt as if the ground had opened up beneath her feet. Business executive attacked for racial discrimination. Viral audio exposes Boston elite, screamed the Boston Herald headline. Below it was a photo of her at the gala, her expression of disdain frozen for eternity. The 23-minute audio was being played on every major radio station in the city. Every venomous word she had uttered against Jasmine echoed crystal clear over the airwaves, accompanied by indignant commentary from the hosts and devastating testimony from people who had witnessed the scene. Victoria ran downstairs, finding Robert in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and an expression she had never seen before, cold, distant, and final. "Robert, you have to do something," she cried, waving her cell phone. "This is a coordinated attack. That waitress is trying to destroy us." "Victoria," Robert said calmly, without looking up from his newspaper, "that waitress is now our new corporate diversity consultant. And after listening to this audio, I completely understand why our company desperately needs her services." Victoria froze. "What did you say?" "Jasmine started yesterday. Her first project will be a complete audit of our corporate culture, including an analysis of all employees in leadership positions." Robert finally looked at her. "I imagine you understand the implications." Just then, Victoria's phone rang. It was Patricia Whitmore, the chair of the board of the tennis club where Victoria had been a member for 15 years. "Victoria, the board met in emergency session this morning," Patricia said without preamble. "Your membership has been revoked, effective immediately. The behavior in the audio recording is incompatible with our values." Before Victoria could respond, the call ended. Then her phone exploded with notifications. The Ladies Who Lunch WhatsApp group, her social elite, was buzzing with messages, all about her. "I can't believe I've been around someone like that for years. My daughter goes to Harvard. I wonder how many Jasmines she's humiliated without us knowing. James said he doesn't want to do business with Hartwell Development anymore." Victoria opened her Instagram account and discovered she had lost 3,000 followers overnight. The comments on her latest photos were brutal. "What a disgusting person. Rich racist exposed. I hope she learned something from this." Margaret called, crying. "Victoria, Charles canceled the contract for the office we were renovating. He said he doesn't want to be associated with toxic elements. I'm socially ruined." By this point, Victoria was hyperventilating. "Robert, you have to make that audio disappear. Sue that woman. Do something." Robert slowly stood up. "Victoria, you said this. Every word came out of your mouth. There's nothing to sue except your own cruelty." The phone rang again. It was Dr. Harrison, the director of the charitable foundation where Victoria had served as a volunteer vice president for 8 years. "Victoria, the board has voted unanimously to remove you from all positions, effective immediately." His voice was icy. "Frankly, Discovering that one of our leaders expressed such discrimination was shocking to all of us. Victoria collapsed into a chair. In less than 24 hours, she had lost her social standing, her friendships, her charity commitments, and the trust of her own community. You know what the most ironic part is? Robert said, folding the newspaper. Jasmine didn't even have to do anything. She just documented your true nature. And let your own words speak for themselves. Right then, Jasmine was at the Hartwell Development Office, being introduced to the Human Resources team. She was decked out in an elegant suit, carrying a briefcase packed with proposals for how to shake things up structurally. In less than a month, she'd gone from a humiliated waitress to a respected consultant. Starting today, Robert announced at the department meeting, Jasmine Washington will be leading our diversity and inclusion initiative. She has full authority to implement the necessary changes in our corporate culture. The employees greeted her with respectful curiosity. A lot of them had heard the viral audio and understood how significant her hiring was. Jasmine addressed the team with the same calm she'd shown during that whole humiliating ordeal. My goal isn't to punish anyone, but to create an environment where everyone feels valued and respected, no matter their background or appearance. Meanwhile, Victoria stayed holed up in her house, watching her social life fall apart on social media. Every notification brought a new wave of humiliation. Canceled invitations, lost friendships, doors slamming shut. Margaret had stopped answering her calls. Patricia Whitmore even posted a photo from a tennis club with a caption celebrating their true values of inclusion and respect. Even her hairdresser canceled her appointments, claiming to be completely booked. Robert went up to the bedroom that night and found Victoria crying in front of the mirror. 23 years, he said simply. 23 years I lived with this person and pretended not to see. Robert, please, can't we talk about this? It was a terrible misunderstanding. Victoria, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was you being exactly who you've always been. But this time, someone was recording it. He walked over to the closet and started taking his clothes out. My lawyers will deliver the divorce papers tomorrow. The house is yours, but our shared assets will be divided according to the court's ruling. Victoria stood up, desperate. You can't be serious. Because of a waitress? Because of a Harvard student you attacked out of pure racial prejudice, Robert corrected. Because of 23 years of tolerating your cruelty. Because of discovering that my wife is exactly the kind of person I've always despised. As Robert packed his bags, Victoria finally grasped the magnitude of what she'd lost. It wasn't just a marriage, but her entire social identity, built on a foundation of privilege that now proved as fragile as glass. The next morning, Jasmine woke up in her apartment near Harvard, getting ready for another day of work that would change not only her own life, but potentially the culture of an entire company. Her phone was blowing up with messages of support from colleagues, professors, and even strangers who'd heard her story. What had started as a night of extra work to pay the bills had turned into an opportunity to implement real, measurable, and lasting change. And all because one privileged woman had completely underestimated who she was messing with. While Victoria faced the collapse of her previous life, Jasmine walked confidently toward a future she would build with competence, dignity, and the strength that comes from turning humiliation into purpose. The waitress Victoria had tried to put in her place was about to redefine what it really meant to occupy a position of power and use it for good. 6 months later, Jasmine was promoted to Director of Diversity at Hartwell Development, implementing policies that became a national model. Her private consulting business grew like crazy, serving big corporations looking for real change. Victoria, on the other hand, lived a reclusive life in her empty mansion, divorced, friendless, banished from the social circles she once dominated. Her pleas for forgiveness on social media only got her more criticism. Desperate attempts to rebuild her image failed miserably. Robert married a civil rights lawyer and donated half his fortune to college scholarships for students like Jasmine. At the Harvard graduation ceremony, Jasmine addressed hundreds of students. Never let anyone define your worth based on prejudice. The best revenge is success they never imagined possible. Victoria's audio still circulated as an example in classes on racial discrimination. Her cruelty had become a case study on the consequences of prejudice. Jasmine turned humiliation into purpose, building a legacy that would change lives for generations. If you believe that no one should be judged by the color of their skin or their origin, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that underestimating people can cost much more than any fortune.